Hey guys, I'm starting this video with a still image and a question. Looking at the screen, are you able to tell me, is there a galvanic field? Am I inside the galvanic field or not? What about the other image? What do you think? What if I told you that I am inside the galvanic field, but it's so massive that it covers full screen, actually more than full screen?
Mach 7, Mach 8.8.
That's quite big. Impressive.
This is a mega AoE galvanic field build, and it actually turned out to be a lot better than I expected. The size is 119 units radius, and I have no AoE scaling on the passive skill tree. How about that? So this is also kind of expensive build, and it surprised me that it performs so well. I do need to swap 2 gems for bossing, but just for like big bosses. It can do map clear well, it can do bossing pretty okay-ish, but it is pretty squishy. I have no like mitigation, almost no I do have 4 endurance charges. I don't have armor, I don't have spell suppression, I don't have evasion. All I have is like 9.6k like effective HP against one hits, like one shots. Other than that, it cannot really tank. Now this is also using Archmage and Indigon. It's also using Ashes, it's also using Diallas, it's also using level 4 Enhance. So it's way over 30 Divines build, and I mean most of the price is Ashes. If you remove Ashes, it's like maybe 15 Divines build. Now, what's the main problem with the Galvanic Field? And I never used it before because it just felt clunky. And I think most people would say that it's annoying to keep recasting it. Well, the funny thing is, this build does not necessarily need to keep like applying new shocks manually. You can just click Galvanic Field, enemies explode, they have a chance to shock our enemies, and once they do that, they just reapply Galvanic Field if you click Galvanic Field like a buff again. So you essentially can play this sort of like a Acid Rain Contagion, except you have to kind of manually keep reproccing like Contagion, sort of. In a very juiced up maps, you would probably be able to do that. Just you click Galvanic Field, it starts shocking, exploding, click Galvanic Field again, it places the Galvanic Field further ahead so it can reach more enemies, and you keep like moving, chasing after it, and keep clicking Galvanic Field again, and it keeps replacing it. And because the explosions that happens, this is the explosion happening from the large cluster jewel, so it's only 10% chance, and I don't have 100% global chance to shock, so not each explosion will shock. But explosions are based on corpse life or on monster's life, so it does good amount of damage and enough damage to shock. This is also able to shock for 105% very easily, even with GMP. In theory, it should be able to shock for 162%. That's an overkill, but you know how lighting damage is from very low to very high, so it's better to have some kind of over the top. Oh yeah, and this is all obviously using Voltaxic Rift, because that's what allows my hair's damage to shock, and not only that, but to get extra maximum effect of shock. Now, the way I'm actually getting this AoE is pretty much just the Phantasmal Galvanic Field. Essentially, the higher shock you can apply to enemies, the more radius you're gonna get. And that radius can also be scaled by increased AoE, which I'm not even doing that, I'm just getting insane amount of shock. So from this, at 105, all the shock effect that I'm getting is from Voltaxic. I'm getting 40% maximum shock, and then from the Lighting Mastery I'm getting another 15%. And I am using Lighting Arrow because it's easier to reach a higher shock effect. With like Shock Nova you could get an extra 10%, but Shock Nova is very melee. I think it would be harder to shock for even like 105% because it just doesn't hit as hard, and it doesn't have the kind of pretend to do more damage thing. Shocks enemies are still dealing 300% more damage. My Lighting Arrow only has 15.8k tooltip DPS, and it is able to hit for 105% shock even against Cirrus. I haven't tried Ubers. This is not really a build for Ubers. Another thing that I almost forgot, there is a way to apply a Galvanic Field on yourself. Captain Lance recently did a video. I would recommend you to check it out. Maybe it's gonna inspire you to combine. Would be so cool if you could get like big AoE Galvanic Field and then still move around and like kind of almost like Lightning Righteous Fire build, right? So yeah, let me talk about all the items. Skills, passive skill tree. As always, path for building import code is in video description. Let's start with Voltaxic Rift. So Lightning Arrow is linked with elemental damage for attacks, not even with quality, not even awakened. Void manipulation, not even with quality. Overcharge is very important. Additional accuracy, because this is Hierophant. I don't have access to enough accuracy, and it makes it easier to get up. And GMP is not necessary, it actually lowers your hit damage. Earlier on you may just run with a 5 link, you're gonna be shooting one projectile, but once you get enough shock effect you can just add GMP. Indigon, it just ramps up the spell damage, but also the mana cost a lot. And I had to tweak it quite a bit. I pretty much can only cast it 3 times before running out of mana, and with a small delay 4 times. So after casting it 3 times, it's kind of my maximum ramp up that I entered in PUB. And remember, this is using Archmage. So Galvanic Field, like, I don't really spam skills, so normally you would never run Archmage with Indigon because it just drains mana way too quickly. So in the Indigon I just have Eternal Blessing with Wrath, so I cannot really have any other auras, but Wrath is free. Casting the Portal is very important. Now, the gloves, I still needed a bit more accuracy and then quite a bit of resistances. I'm not sure about the implicits, but you do want the Chaos Leech. Initially I had what is it called, Illuminated Devotion for Spell Leech's Life, but later on I replaced it with this because the mana management was a bit too much, so I had to lower the mana cost. The Chaos Damage Leech's Life is pretty important because you are doing Chaos damage. That's another thing. The Lucky Lightning damage does not work because you're not doing lightning damage, you're doing Chaos damage. Now, the Shock Proliferation, I'm not sure if it's needed. It does help a bit with clearing, but clearing shouldn't need any more help, so you may want a Nav instead, which would give 10% more spell damage. In here I have like just Flame Dash. You do want to link Flame Dash with LA Focus because when you Flame Dash you may actually accidentally shock enemies and proc the Galvanic Field, which is gonna be weaker than from the Lightning Arrow. And then the Spare with the Hex Bloom, I was experimenting. Hex Bloom just kind of spreads to other enemies. The Belt, you essentially just want to stack as much mana as possible everywhere you can. So the Belt is also using that, getting increased mana recovery rate, which affects the blast and then the regen and the, well, I don't have mana leech. I was actually experimenting and using Worm's Belt, but for that you need mana leech support, and the all quality that gives damage is very expensive. Well, not really very, but I did not want to pay for that. And the problem is, like, that leech feels great, but the problem is I pretty much only shoot Lightning Arrow like once every couple of seconds because it just hits multiple screens with the Galvanic Field, so there's no reason, and you can't even hit the enemies that are dying like before you can even see them. So the leech would be nice, but it just not really very viable, and I don't really want to spam Lightning Arrow. So I replaced the belt with just big mana. Boots also nothing special, I'm just getting shock avoidance and that's pretty much it. The relic actually is also nothing, it's just pretty much tiny bit of damage and a bit more chance to avoid the shock essentially. This build feels a bit slow, so I did get the onslaught on Kill Quiver, but that's pretty much just for the map clear. And a bit of accuracy, life mana, also good. Dexterity is also very needed because you need to hit 212 dexterity for the Voltaxic Rift. Now, Ashes of the Star, ideally you would want Fatigue quality, pretty much nothing else matters. Fatigue quality, because if you don't get Fatigue quality, I have 29 quality and I had to get at least 21 quality Galvanic Field. So Dialla also needs to be at least 1 red and then 5 greens. For the maximum, absolute maximum damage you would want 2 reds and then 4 greens, I guess. Because when you place it in the green socket, it increases the quality by 30%. So I placed it in the green socket to increase the quality to just get more radius. But if you place it in the red, you get +2 levels, so that would be more damage, but way less EOE. And then in the red you place the enhance to get extra levels, to get extra quality. And then elemental focus because it cannot shock anyway. Awakened chain for clear speed works really well. I tried the Lightning Mastery for extra 1 chain and it did not feel good enough. You definitely want more chains than 1. So either use normal chain and maybe Lightning Mastery, or maybe just normal chain or Awakened chain, but it really is needed for the clear speed. Then Archmage, and then I chose to use Divergent Arcane Surge just for extra Arcane Surge duration, because I'm not really proccing it very often, so it's better to make it last longer. Oh, and in the boots I have Spell Totem linked with Wither and the Multi Totem. And then I chose to use Steel Skin. Yes, not Arcane Cloak. The mana management is just a bit too much. Like look, I cast it 3 times and I'm out of mana. I cannot even cast the 4th time fast enough. If I use Arcane Cloak, it messes up the mana cost for the Galvanic Field way too much. Rings, just big mana and resistances. Oh, and don't mind the flash that you see on all of these clips, because I had a sub goal to taste energy drinks. I never tasted any energy drinks, so that's why I placed those. It's not an ad. I just placed those to show what I tasted so far. Right, for the single target, you want to swap Enhance and you want to swap Awakened Chain unless you're fighting multiple bosses. Like if you're fighting 3 or 4 bosses at the same time, Awakened Chain will help a lot, because so Galvanic Field on a single target can strike twice per second. Doesn't scale with cast speed, doesn't scale with the cooldown. But against like multi-targets, it shoots like 10 arcs. And all of those arcs can hit different targets and then chain to other targets. So with chain you can actually increase your single target damage if there are more than 2 or 3 targets. So I actually just weapon swap quickly, replace Enhance with Empower, and then replace Awakened Chain with the Awakened Void Manipulation, which isn't even level 5, it's not even with quality. And then for the boss, I essentially drop Wither, cast Galvanic Field 3 times, shoot the boss, apply the curse, that's it, and then wait. And then I have to keep casting Galvanic Field 3 times before shocking again. I think there are many ways to build around this. This was my first time building Galvanic Field, and I'm not really a big fan of mana stacking builds. But I am using one thing that increases the effect by quite a lot and works really well. This Lighting Mastery increases and reductions to maximum mana also apply to shock effect at 30% of their value. So the more maximum mana you stack, the more shock effect you get. And it works really well on the mana stacking builds. I am using the Forbidden Jewels to pick up the thing that gives Battle Mage, but not only Battle Mage, but it also gives me 10% more attack damage for each non-instant spell I have cast in the last 8 seconds, which means I get more damage for Lightning Arrow for it to be able to shock harder, or easier to shock for the maximum amount. I did also plan this as an Occultist. It is possible to do it as Occultist. You would have like better explosions, but you would lose quite a bit of AoE, and the mana management would be harder, so I'm not sure, and it may be squishier. So on the passive skill tree I picked up a couple mana masteries. I also picked up a recover 10% mana over 1 second when you use a guard skill. I tried it with Arcane Cloak, it was not enough. I was barely recovering because I cannot have clarity, because I can only have 1 aura. If you somehow add clarity, maybe using Essence Worm, put Wrath inside it and then clarity separately. You could also use Watcher's Eye and then have way more mana regen and mana recovery, and then maybe you could use Arcane Cloak instead. But yeah, I also have quite a bit of damage taken and recoup as mana. To get enough dexterity, I'm using careful planning in here. I'm getting like a lot. If I remove this, like I'm lacking 107 dexterity. Remember that this is a Chaos build which scales from the lighting damage, so you can still get damage from these nodes, but the lighting penetration will not do anything. Instead, you want Chaos penetration. From the Cluster Jewel, I did get the Dark Ideation. This gives up to 80% increased Chaos damage, which is great. And then Unspeakable Gift, and that Chaos damage explosion can shock other enemies. From the Medium Jewel, kind of want Astonishing Afflictions to increase the effect and also increase the shock duration. That's why I also anointed this Static Blows to get an extra 50% increased duration of lighting ailments. And on the small cluster, Eldritch Inspiration, just maximum mana, mana regen, and Chaos damage. If you can get dexterity on cluster jewels, that would be ideal as well. This is also using Elemental Overload, and I have like 17% critical strike chance, so it's very easy to proc Elemental Overload. Initially I went actually to the left to pick up like these and then life here, but that wasn't really worth it. Like I don't need the mana reservation stuff, so and these would be nice, but in the end it was better to travel here to pick up like more mana and then more jewels, because I am also using Watcher's Eye just for the extra damage for Wrath. Actually, there is a Sublime Vision which gives increased effect of Wrath, and you cannot use any other auras anyway. This actually always saps while affected by Wrath does not work, because sap requires lighting damage. This would be very nice, but I'm doing Chaos damage and sap requires lighting. because Voltaxic Rift only allows your chaos damage to shock, and it doesn't say anything about sap. So sadly this Sublime Vision does not work. It kind of gives around 7% more damage, so it's actually pretty much the same damage as you get from Watcher's Eye, just increased lightning damage while affected by Wrath, that's it. The extra conversion, actually I cannot really run, well I can run physical reflect maps, but it is pretty dangerous because I am getting quite a bit of flat physical damage to my spells through the Battle Mage. So the Galvanic Field, once it scales its spell damage, it can do quite a bit of physical damage, as you can see. So, or maybe you couldn't see because my camera is blocking. So it is pretty dangerous to run physical reflect maps, and you kind of don't really want to risk and do elemental reflect maps because Flame Dash is also, I guess you could link Flame Dash with Void Manipulation. That way you would not do any elemental damage, but yeah. And yeah, that pretty much covers this build. I don't really have idea for the next build yet again. We still got like 50 days left until end of the league, so there's still a lot of time. So if you got some interesting build ideas, leave them in the comments below. But now, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.